Rewind-a-dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from Jon and Wai-Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Welcome everybody to Rewind-a-Dynamite. My name is Wai-Ting, and joining me, back by very, very popular demand in the digital world and also in the real world, from what I understand, we have Bruce Lord joining us again. How are you doing, Bruce?
Doing pretty well, Wai. Thanks very much. Yeah, things seem to have gone over pretty well for the last couple of appearances here, so hopefully we can keep that going.
How have you been over the past week?
Decent, actually, whatever. It's locked down. It's, trying to isolate as much as you can. So you sort of have to do what you can to sort of try to stay sane and everything. And in my case, that's just taken the form of just binging on as much Puroresu as I possibly can, trying to keep up with all the New Japan tournament stuff as well as DDT and Noah business. So yeah, it's easy to, or not easy, but easier to hold off from going outside or whatever if you've got some crazy Japanese wrestling to watch.
Well, I actually haven't really been keeping up at all with the Tag League or the Best of the Super Juniors. Are there any highlights that you might recommend thus far?
The Tag League hasn't been great, I'll admit. There's been a couple of okay matches there, but nothing super fantastic. In terms of the Super Juniors, for me, obviously, Takahashi's, most of Hiromu's matches are going to be worth watching, as well as Desperados. Those have been the highlights. Really, oddly enough, for me with the Tag League, the thing I'm kind of interested in is Hanare and how they're presenting him in this tag team with Tanahashi, in terms of, because he was somebody who was obviously about to start kind of getting a proper push just before everything shut down. So interested to see where they sort of position him and what sort of stories they start telling with him.
So I know you said you might not be doing a whole lot with the lockdown going on, but I'm curious to know if you'll be doing any sort of Black Friday shopping this weekend.
Maybe a little bit of online shopping. I'm sure as hell not going to any mall or anything like that. There's probably some Christmas shopping that I can get done on various websites. There were a few. I was actually planning on getting some of those the IWGP heavyweight pins that they have over at Pro Wrestling Tees, but they sold out of them just when I was going to go grab them. So no luck there. But probably get some Christmas shopping done at PWT and whatnot.
Well, I hope that whatnot includes store.postwrestling.com. Post Wrestling Store right now, we've got a 20% off sale going on all week for Black Friday, all the way until Cyber Monday. So if you go to the store right now, store.postwrestling.com, t-shirts are all 20% off. That includes all of our Post Wrestling t-shirts. That includes Rocky Maivia Picture Show t-shirts. That includes Post Pro Res t-shirts or Bushby and Thompson's Wrestling Adventure. And so, speaking of Bushby and Thompson's Wrestling Adventure, that kind of perfectly leads into our segue for the schedule coming out. First of all, what is on the site right now? We have a whole lot of stuff, and those of you who have been sorely missing John Pollock, as we all have, you can get a bit of a fill of John Pollock, as he not only joined me for our ECW Anarchy Rules 1999 Rewind Away, that's currently out on the Patreon right now. Great fun talking about that show involving Taz, who has a big presence on tonight's episode of Dynamite as well. So that's up there on the Post Wrestling Cafe for all of our patrons. As well, John spent some time reading the Young Bucks autobiography and typing a very well written little kind of like review / like retrospective on the Young Bucks career, which you can read right now at postwrestling.com. All the while, like, managing who knows what at home. The man with more than enough on his plate at the moment. So we try to continue to give him as much time to him and his family as we can. So that's all up there right now. We've got an MLW report from John Cena that's on the website. We've got an Impact report from last night from Davey Portman that's on the website. Andrew Thompson has an exclusive interview with Mance Warner. You can watch that on Andrew Thompson Interviews on YouTube, or you can read the written version of it on postwrestling.com. But speaking, of course, of Andrew Thompson, he will be joined with Martin Bushby tomorrow on the Wrestling Adventure on the BWE feed. They will be going over ROH's Manhattan Mayhem 2, featuring the 2007 Wrestling Observer Newsletter Match of the Year in Takeshi Morishima versus Bryan Danielson. That's a match you can find right now on YouTube, on the ROH YouTube for free. So if you want to watch that before the review tomorrow, you can do that. It'll also be linked in the show description. But why don't we just bring the man on right now to talk about the day's news? Andrew Thompson, are you there?
I am here. Wait, Ting, what's going on, Chief?
You're very busy, very, very busy with whole lot of presence at postwrestling.com in the form of podcasts, in the form of interviews, in the form of your face being on t-shirt designs. So just really taking over the entire website. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Can we get a special shout out to one Bruce Lord for his appearance on last week's Dynamite? A great appearance, might I say.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Great job from Bruce, of course.
Yeah, man. It's been quite the newsworthy week in pro wrestling, as usual.
Well, what's going on today?
Well, today, unfortunately, we got to start off with some bad news. Longtime TNA / Impact employee Bob Ryder passed away today. A number of people within pro wrestling came out and said their condolences to his family and loved ones, like Matt Hardy, Frankie Kazarian, Sanjay Dutt, Taz, Drake Maverick, Christopher Daniels, and many more. Paid their respects to the life of Bob Ryder. He was a travel director for Impact for a long time, and most remember him for his time as a pro wrestling journalist. He used to be a writer on the One Wrestling website. So yeah, it seemed like a lot of people were very close to him, wrestlers and pro wrestling fans alike. So rest in peace to Bob Ryder.
Man, for like the better part of, I would say, the last 20 years, I think, his name has really been closely associated with TNA and really being credited even as a co-founder, I believe, when the Jarretts came up with the idea through him. But I definitely remember Bob Ryder more so from his time as a host of Wrestling Observer or WCW Live towards the end of WCW, and also at the beginning, I would say, of like the whole digital media era when it comes to pro wrestling journalism, along with, of course, with the Wrestling Observer Radio, and also, of course, the Law, which our whole kind of like lineage kind of derives from. So somebody who I definitely feel like in our industry, like we definitely owe real gratitude to as a pioneer. So it was a tremendous loss, not just for people directly as a part of Impact, but I would say like a lot of people in our circles in the wrestling community as well.
I mean, without wanting to, say anything personally about him, I think the fact that you have anyone who, effectively was present within Impact for the entire run of that company's existence is remarkable, given all of the various regime changes and shifts and changes in talent and direction. The fact that one person was there for all of that obviously says something.
Yeah, and Impact has a very extensive and detailed story up about Bob Ryder up on their website. So if anybody wants to check that out, they did a nice tribute to him up on their website for all that he contributed to the company. But kind of on a more positive note, some big news coming out of the gaming world. WWE's Xavier Woods has been signed to G4. And G4 used to be a show that aired on TV, I think from 2004 to 2014. They were a gaming show. And this past summer, they announced a relaunch, and Xavier Woods sort of made his campaign on social media to get back on the show and be a host. And he manifested it. And now Xavier Woods is officially a host. Everybody knows Xavier Woods built the Up, Up, Down, Down YouTube channel that has 2 million subscribers. So congratulations to Xavier Woods.
I believe G4, in fact, was like almost a channel at one point. Or
yeah,
a portion of a channel.
Yeah.
And I had watched. I mean, of course, this is where like Olivia Munn made her name, and of course she went into like great heights. But like for fans who have been following Austin Creed, Xavier Woods on Twitter, they know that he's been campaigning for a long time to be a co-host of Nick Arcade. And I guess when this G4 a relaunch came about, he kind of repositioned his sights to set on this, and so to see him achieve something like this, I'm extremely happy for the man himself. I think he's a perfect person for the job. He will be tremendous at it. Of course, he's great on screen, but he really, really, of course, knows his video games. Now, my big question, of course, is like, how is this going to work while he juggles a professional wrestling career, and especially in light of all this, independent contractor stuff that's been going on? What kind of maybe complications does that bring? Or do you guys think that WWE is, well aware and 100% on board with it?
I mean, whether they are or are not aware of it, it certainly has to act as a sort of a signal or some sort of precedent to, the other not employees, excuse me, but the other, contracted workers there that, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, call it a double standard, because obviously this is, for whatever reason, not something that is runs or contravenes the contracts that they have there, or that some sort of arrangement has been worked out. And yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It seems like a match made in heaven from what little I know about, the kind of current esports world there. But the fact that you have somebody doing what is going to be such a visible bit of work, especially, tapping into, I imagine, all sorts of audiences that maybe have very little idea as to who Xavier Woods is outside of, his presence within the gaming world, right? I feel as though you have, in so many rosters, but definitely on the WWE main roster, so many talents who have connections to and interests in other parts of the world with whom they can sort of form organic connections, right? And we all know that, Up, Down, Down was started off as being, one of his pet projects before it kind of got so big that it kind of had to get the WWE stamp of approval on it. So, yeah, I mean, it kind of maybe is one of those rare examples of somebody actually being able to grab the brass ring, but you have to imagine that other people are going to want similar amounts of leeway and freedom with this.
And Bruce, I think you brought up a good point when you talked about WWE stamp of approval, since they promoted it a lot when the news first came out, and they retweeted it and shared it and put their own article up. So you would think that they knew about this beforehand, of course. But I think one of the, when Wade talked about the schedule part, Sasha Banks she did like one of those media tours earlier today. And one of the interviews she did, she talked about the schedule that she had for WWE and The Mandalorian, and she was filming that while she was actively performing. And she said that it was days when, she basically, most of the time it was days she had to just, go straight to WWE, hop on a flight, go to the set of The Mandalorian film. And then, it was, right back to the grind of whatever else she had to do. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see kind of how the schedule plays out. And I also kind of see the difference, like how Sasha Banks in The Mandalorian, she was referred to by her birth name, Mercedes Varnado, and Xavier Woods is being, referred to as by his on-screen name instead of his birth name.
Seems like Austin Creed is the name that he goes with already on Up, Down, Down, and it seems like it's the name that G4 is promoting him currently as. Yeah, certainly. You have to imagine, the way, the lack of house shows right now obviously helps with a lot of projects like these. Would a project like this, for Woods be possible if they were still doing house shows? I wonder what's the extent of his involvement going to be with G4. I mean, from the looks of these trailers, it seems like it'll be pretty extensive.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of transitioning over to Impact Wrestling here, we have Jazz is returning to the ring. She appeared on Impact showing Access, and she's going to be teaming with Jordan Grace in the Knockouts Tag Title Tournament. The interesting thing about this is a couple of months back, Jazz announced her retirement from pro wrestling, and now she is back. So this begs the question: will the Undertaker be back one of these days? And also, what do you guys think about Jazz making a comeback?
Well, I mean, the Jazz's work rate, I imagine, is going to continue to be a lot better than anything Taker could crank out for a good long while here, I would think. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I thought that she had sort of kind of semi-de facto sort of soft retired even earlier than this, right? I could be wrong, but
no, I think you're right.
Yeah, but I do remember people sort of saying, I hadn't seen much from her, over the past few years, but I remember hearing comments from people sort of saying, no, she can still really go. There's really not a lot of wear and tear or ring rust on her. So yeah, absolutely go for it.
It was sort of unfortunate that before the NWA kind of had their, most recent boom with Power, that Jazz kind of made her exit at about the same time. So we never really got to see her kind of ride that sort of wave. But I'm really glad that she's coming back and a part of this one. I definitely didn't expect during a pandemic for somebody like her to be motivated enough to want to come back. But, again, maybe it's a taping schedule that is somewhat helpful for her, or did she give a reason about why she was coming back right now?
So I don't think she gave a reason as to why she's coming back now, but I know the reason she retired. She did say she was beat up. That was just her main reason. She was beat up, and all the years Jazz has been wrestling since 1998, I think. So she been in the business for a long time, and I know her and Thunder Rosa are opening up a wrestling school, and she's like a co-booker or like a backstage producer for the SWE Fury promotion down in Texas with Teddy Long and her husband Rodney Mack. So she's still involved in wrestling, but I'm guessing that bug just never fully went away.
I totally forgot this, but she was in the Casino Battle Royal last year.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd completely lost that. Yeah. On the all out buy-in there. Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, Bruce, were you kind of surprised that AEW would bring somebody like her in, especially like considering how their women's division is kind of still green? I think it's kind of fair to say, and with somebody with the experience level of Jazz, you would think,
Oh, yeah, I do remember this. I mean, I'd spaced on it when you first brought her name up, but now I'm remembering this. And yeah, I remember people were sort of talking about like, yeah, she looked perfectly, fine in that match, and that she could be one of those veteran presences that you would want to sort of help, kind of bring up and raise, some of the younger folks in that women's division there. I remember it was, her and Martinez kind of coming in as sort of these like, oh, it would be really interesting if you had them as kind of stable veteran hands in the locker room there. So yeah, good on her.
Yeah, and we just finished talking about Jazz. Jazz is a former NWA World Women's Champion, and the National Wrestling Alliance is returning next week. I believe December 1st with their Shockwave show premiering on YouTube at 6 p.m. Eastern. The NWA has been through their trials and tribulations, of course, through the pandemic. They just lost Allison Kay, Marty Bill, Serena Deeb, and the Thunder Rose is all over the place, man, as far as her popularity and as far as what she can do, while being under contract with the NWA. But when you guys see the Shockwave show, and after seeing kind of the attempt at Carney Land that they had that didn't work, and then of course Power not being able to run because of the pandemic, do you think NWA is kind of hanging on to something that might not be able to work with this Shockwave show? Because from what was announced on YouTube by Joe Galley is going to be matches that we haven't seen before on YouTube. So I'm assuming these are going to be matches that were taped at Power or were taped at United Wrestling Network at one of their shows, and that we just haven't seen before. So what do you guys think about this new launch for the NWA, and is this thing really going to do as well as they think?
I mean, I'm on record as a big fan of Power. I really, really enjoyed it a great deal in that particular presentation there. But yeah, if we're talking about matches that are probably going to be featuring a large number of people who've, since Power shut down, gone on and moved on to other fields and may not be associated with the NWA anymore. Okay, fine. It's sort of, if the content is sort of a piece with what Power was like, okay, I'm sure it'll be entertaining, but it doesn't necessarily point a way forward. I'm one of those people who did, I don't know why, maybe I was just, felt like doing them a mitzvah or whatever, but I actually pre-ordered the first 4 episodes of the primetime wrestling shows. And, they were fine. They were okay, but they weren't really like compelling must-see TV. I think I watched the first 3 of them, and I don't even think I've bothered to check out the 4th one. And apart from the Rosa, the women's, title changing there, I don't know that I've really heard any buzz that would make me want to seek out and pursue any of the other shows that have come out since then. So yeah, I mean, there's so much promise or potential in this kind of revamped, reinvigorated NWA, but obviously the pandemic completely derailing them, maybe even more so than most other promotions here. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll find out, I suppose. Wait, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, I think, like last week we had talked about, with the departure of,
Marty Bell.
That I definitely got the indication that, NWA wasn't necessarily trying to bargain and trying to, spend that much money to try to retain a lot of these people. But at the same time, seeing something like this in the works, it tells me that they realize they have plenty of people still on their roster that people are fans of, people like Nick Aldis and Tim Storm. And, through this new partnership with the UWN, they do have the ability to record matches and at the very least, be able to show some of those extra bits of content to an audience and a fan base that they've grown for the better part of a year on their YouTube channel. Like that, I think people still hold out hope that NWA Power can return. There are a lot of fans that I think miss it, like yourself, Bruce. And, knowing that you still have this audience who demands that sort of product from the NWA with this particular roster and in this particular style, like that's a resource that I, probably shouldn't be wasted. And in fact, one helps the other, doesn't it? You have a free weekly show on YouTube at the same time slot that you've conditioned people to tune into, and using that as a way to build to perhaps some of these primetime live cards in the future. It at least seems to me, to be making the best of the situation.
Yeah, and I think with this Shockwave show, I think it kind of gives them like a little bit of an out from the situation they were in last time, because with Power, I feel like just the setup that they had and the way that things were done, I feel like fans were so needed for that product. But with this Shockwave thing that they have coming out, I'm assuming is going to be similar to what we've seen with the United Wrestling Network's primetime live show, or something that resembles that. So maybe they can, kind of distance themselves from, what would be needed if it was a Power type of thing. And I think also just with the NWA and the pandemic, like they're a self-funded, organization, and I'm like everything's coming from Billy Corgan, it seems like. So I think the pandemic just really crushed them a lot. And I know they had I know they were planning to do a WrestleMania week show prior to, they had that mapped out, but of course that didn't happen. So it's gonna be interesting to see what they do, man.
And any other stories from you, Andrew?
No, it's gonna wrap it up for me today.
Well, if you wouldn't mind one more time just telling us everything that you wanted to promote on the site and where people could find you.
You can check out all the wrestling news up on the Post Wrestling site. A bunch of news, man. And of course, I got to shout out my sworn enemy John Cena for his his MLW report. Great stuff by him right there. And you can check out the Andrew Thompson Interviews YouTube channel, my newest interview with Mans Warner, and you can follow me on Twitter at @ADThompson __. You hear that way? _.
Double underscore. You got to remember the double underscore. Great stuff as always, Andrew. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you put on the website.
No doubt.
And we'll be chatting with you Friday.
No doubt.
Speaking with you, Andrew.
Peace, y'all.
Okay, Bruce. We dive in here. Tonight's edition of Dynamite. Are you ready?
Let's go for it. I'm ready. Got my notes. Got my coffee. Let's do it.
Oh, coffee at night, not decaf?
It's like half and half sort of a situation, okay. Which that's probably a little bit risky for somebody of my advanced age at this hour of the evening. But I got a bit more work to do after this. So
for me, it's a nap. Like a nap right before doing these like watching these shows has been key. So I got one in today. I'm good. So AEW tonight. It's a tape show. So we have a sweetened sounding audience, which seems to, I would say, split much of the viewers at home. Some, like myself, feel like it definitely heightens the experience and is better than not having them. But others, especially recently, have been commenting that it's been a little too much. What are your thoughts on it?
I have noticed. There was a show about 3 or 4 weeks ago where it did feel a little bit cranked up and a little bit kind of in the red there. I thought this was a perfectly decent compromise if you are going to be doing a little bit of audio sweetening there. The other thing is that they were pretty darn careful about keeping shots of the actual stadium almost entirely out. So you really weren't getting a sense of what if however many fans were in the building at all. So I was perfectly fine with this level of it.
Yeah, I got the sense that there weren't even any audience members in the crowd other than, the talent.
They cut to a few, when Judas was played, but they have to have stock footage of people singing along to Judas at this point. So could have just been that. I don't know.
Our first match is Hangman Adam Page taking on John Silver, who they're now dubbing the Meat Man, among other names, I bet. It is Page's first match back since his loss to Kenny Omega at Full Gear. And we start off the match with John Silver continuing to be his very cocky self, and as far as how matched they are, they're very evenly matched early on, with Silver repeatedly getting the better of Hangman Page, in fact. Page attempts his first attempt at the buckshot lariat, but it's countered with a Rana, and I believe a brainbuster for 2. There are a number of big kicks from John Silver. Hangman pretty much absorbs it all before hitting a Liger Bomb for 2. Hangman makes a second attempt at the buckshot lariat, this time landing it, giving Page the win in about 10 minutes. This was a good little rehab match for Page. He looked great in there with John Silver, who I thought was very physical, but of course also had a great deal of personality. What did you think of the match?
I really liked this. I was looking forward to it because, like you were just saying there, I think that Silver was a really good partner for Page to get that sort of back on your feet, kind of getting well again win that he needed to have there. I'm going to sound like a broken record because I feel like I've mentioned this in feedback to Dynamite and everything like that so many times. But I think you've got something pretty great in what Silver can do. Obviously, there's the current wave of BTE popularity that he's been able to ride, but those really explosive series of moves that he was able to pull out, I think about 80-90% into the match, just this really fast finishing sequence with like lots of lariats and kicks and power bombs, suplexes and DDTs that he was just boom 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 moving between very, very quickly there. I think he's doing a good job of demonstrating that he's much more than just, like lower card comedy guy who's got the catchphrases and everything. So that worked for me. Also noticed, I don't know if you saw this as well or if this was intentional or not, kind of looked like there was a little bit of like shadow or black or purple around Page's eyes when he came out. Like he was a little bit, kind of detoxing or a little bit underslept there. I'm not sure if that was on purpose or not.
Interesting. That's a detail I didn't personally notice, but well, judging by the post-match angle, that could very well be possible because Evil Uno comes out. He grabs the mic to talk to Adam Page. He says he regrets a lot of the Dark Order's actions against him and the Elite in the past, but he says Page is somebody who has tried to leave his group many times, but they always prevent him from doing so. And if that's not a cult, he doesn't know what is. So he again extends the invitation to Adam Page to join the Dark Order. This time, I would say in a much more kind of like, sincere, less jokey way. And then they leave. So they are again trying to dangle the idea that Page might be leaving the Elite, this time perhaps to join the Dark Order.
I feel like they might have done, I know they definitely did this on BTE. I can't remember if it made it onto Dynamite after Page's loss to Jericho, about a year ago. But it really felt like it was a lot more meaningful here, right? We've had so many more layers and, kind of levels of anxiety and desperation and self-doubt added to the Page character since then, right? There was the whole, Hangman sucks chant that he got in on BTE a week or two ago. You had him sort of with these kind of like doubtful, self-questioning looks on his face when Silver would kick out. Not the usual sort of like, what? I can't believe he kicked out of that, but more this sort of knowing like, yep, I'm having a tough time of it right now. And it's a really subtle sort of line that his character is walking right now. So I thought this more sort of straightforward, serious delivery from Uno, leaving the offer on the table and then leaving was the way to do this and to kind of keep Hangman's story and the question of where he's going to go from here going.
Hangman has sort of been like walking this line for like what feels like forever. The idea that he really is very close to leaving the Elite, but he can't leave. I mean, as kind of Uno alludes to. But, man, it's really hard for me to think at the end of all this, somehow he could entertain the idea of being a part of the Dark Order. As successful as the Dark Order is, I don't think they need Page. I don't think really Page, I don't know. It's not a fit that I'm clamoring for. It's not a fit that I think either team necessarily will benefit that much from. So by the end of it, I don't know if I can really get behind the tease all that much. So I do, however, at least look for like, what sort of interesting story they might be able to tell. But do you think the audience can really suspend their disbelief at this point to think that he might actually join?
I think there's enough of it there. I think, and again, when it's delivered, with a bit more seriousness as it needed to be here, I think the tease itself can work. I mean, yeah, you're right. I would not want to see it being done for anything more than like, like a quick like half an episode fake out where he seems to be agreeing to join for one match and then turns on them or something like that. I do not think we need to have a whole, Daniel Bryan joining the Wyatt family type story kind of wedged in here. But I do think that that's sort of like, why don't you come over to this side thing as a looming question is a good thing to have in the background for what is probably ultimately going to be the redemption and rebirth of Hangman Page, presumably kind of emerging out of this funk and going on to presumably challenge Kenny Omega for the title sometime in the future.
Well, speaking of Kenny, up next we see him backstage with Alex Marvez. Kenny's wearing a suit again ahead of today's contract re-signing redo because last week, of course, Moxley was attacked and was not able to make it. Kenny says the more things change, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And he says this year, instead of Kenny being on the faces of magazines, being called the best in the world, it's Jon Moxley. But after the title eliminator tournament, Kenny is now part of that conversation again. Now he just needs the belt to prove it. He reiterates a gentleman's challenge that he set to Jon Moxley, which means if you want to be the best, beat me based on your ability. No weapons, no tables, no garbage cans like their last encounter. He says congratulations to Moxley on his wife's pregnancy, alluding to his wife's pregnancy. And then he ends the promo by saying, the story about Moxley's childhood, talking about his father, was really tugged on his heartstrings. But he says, thinking back, Kenny thinks his dad would probably beat his. So definitely fighting words from Kenny here.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that a lot of people don't like the more, commonly expected from Kenny, sort of like more manic, intense, almost cartoon-like promo. And I do think this was an attempt from him to do something that was a bit more level and a bit more even. The register that he was sort of hitting with, like, oh yeah, I'm kind of jealous of the fact that, all of the attention is on you. And I recognize that used to be my spot and I have to fight to get back in there. Absolutely. Thumbs up, A-okay with that, even if the delivery was a bit even. But finishing, I mean, look, I appreciate a my dad can beat up your dad dig as much as anybody else, but this was not the time or the place for it. And I don't even mind him mentioning his father in some sort of way, right? Just even something a bit more subtle, like just sort of saying, like, I don't know if your dad was actually a good man at all, or something like that, referring back to this whole we're the good guys thing. Are you sure your dad was a good man? Something a little bit more subtle than just what sounds like a grade school schoolyard taunt, I think.
But isn't that the Kenny Omega like promo style, at least at this point? Like, he is almost so overtly heel, you think he's kind of putting it on as a babyface. And a line like this, I thought was just kind of more him, like continuing to rile Moxley up, like the way he has been trying to lately.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just would have I would have liked him going a bit more for what seemed like a more deeper personal dig at what was obviously this very sort of difficult story and difficult relationship, as Moxley has only, sparingly alluded to it before. I kind of feel like treating the father thing with the gravitas that Moxley had treated it with would be a better way of getting under his skin. But that's just my take on it.
You did say, like, this kind of felt like Kenny, maybe an attempt at being a bit more of a serious promo. And I mean, I certainly felt that way. I really actually liked the way he kind of like, introduced his motivation here. Like, Mox is really somebody who is kind of like a part of that best in the world conversation this year that Kenny was a part of last year. Kenny has largely been absent for that discussion. And this year he is trying to reclaim it by winning this championship belt. It's a pretty simple story that really kind of like, lays on the table. This is the best in the world last year. He's going up against the best in the world this year, which I think is super simple and, gets me interested in the match.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I think they came back to later on with the angle that they did later in this episode.
We catch up with Darby Allin. He's in his yard. He paints the words "Survive if I let you" on his Darby Allin sedan before setting it on fire and looking cool in black and white.
It was funny before what happened later on in this episode occurred. Him making that callback to Taz there sort of reminded me that, yeah, as much as Taz has obviously gone on to have a great second half of a career as a manager and as a commentator, he does still have, this reputation as, obviously an ECW original and a legit badass, right? I imagine, your eyes must have really perked up at this way after the review that's just gone up of the old ECW show with John there.
Definitely, yeah. It's quite incredible how like all these Taz phrases, 20 years later, I mean, they're still immediately recognizable. The FTW Championship. It's despite him like having 20 years in the WWE and Impact, not really kind of like referencing that hardcore aspect of ECW, of the ECW character at least. Like, I mean, people don't forget. So, yeah. We go up next to the newly rebranded Powerhouse Hobbs, the former Will Hobbs. They call him Powerhouse now. Powerhouse Hobbs, accompanied by Taz, taking on Lee Johnson. Taz joins the commentary team. He's gloating about the big surprise last week. Hobbs is dressed in an orange and black singlet, being on brand. As Hobbs beats Johnson on the floor, he makes faces at the Nightmare family members sitting ringside, including the Gun Club here. We then simply get back into the ring, and of course, Lee Johnson, also a member of the Nightmare family too, here. So back in the ring, big power slam from Hobbs, basically gives him the win. A really quick squash. I'm going to say even less than 3 minutes, if that. So what did you think of this?
Pretty decent for giving us a vision of what the new and rebranded Hobbs is going to be looking like. He had a much more methodical, less kind of explosive babyface style in this match. I thought that the really kind of menacing glower that he had on his face looked pretty good when they had some close-ups of that. They even gave him, just to call back to the gear there, they even gave him like the kind of the weird fur sort of cloak or robe or whatever it was that Taz used to come out with. So, I mean, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but I mean, Taz has been giving people stick for the last year on Dynamite and Dark for gimmick infringement, right? Whenever anybody is wearing even a thread of orange on their gear. So I thought that this was a nice thing that, Cage gets the FTW title, Hobbs gets the orange ring gear. I thought that was cool.
I think Hobbs looks great as a heel. Like you mentioned, this evil scowl he has on his face at the end of the match, I think suits him really well, makes him look even meaner than he probably comes across typically just by looking at somebody of his size. So I'm a big fan of this pairing, and of course it remains to be seen how well he fits with the rest of the team, because he and Cage kind of operate very similar roles. But I think we'll have a bit more of a glimpse of that later on. So Taz speaks. He tells Hobbs to go celebrate with the others while he takes care of some business himself. He says he has a problem with AEW not acknowledging the FTW title. He's not leaving until somebody from management shows up and tells him why. Taz Mike gets cut off mid-sentence. He tells Justin Roberts to grab his. He starts talking. He says to Keith Mitchell and Tony Khan in the back that if they shut his mic again this time, he's going to grab one of the commentary headsets. And before he can finish his threat, this mic gets cut off too. Cody shows up here. Cody is wearing a headset, which indicates, I guess, the executive role, because he's controlling the show.
Kind of calling back to what we were talking about a few weeks ago, where Taz was sort of riding that line as to, am I calling Cody out as a wrestler or am I calling him out as an exec?
Yeah, they're definitely not shying away from the idea that it's well recognized that Cody is not just an active performer, but somebody who really this goes for the Bucks, and I would say maybe Kenny to a lesser extent, but Cody for sure. They are kind of not afraid to portray him as somebody who works in the back, in control of the show as it progresses. So Taz says he wants somebody to put respect on the FTW title. He's tired of this shit. Cody says, I'll run it up the flagpole. And then Taz says, are you going to tell me some more corporate bullshit next? Creative has nothing for you? Are you going to wish me best in my future endeavors? At this point, Cody gets fired up. He says, your son Hook wants to be a pro wrestler, right? Well, then why isn't he training with you? And why is he training with me? Taz puts his mic down. Off mic, he says he can't believe Cody went there. He says he went too far. That was stupid. He pretends to leave. Cody turns around, but in comes Taz, locking in the Kata Hajime, the Taz mission, onto Cody, prompting the Nightmare family to come out from the back to make the save. And as Taz leaves, we actually get a look of his son, Hook, who joins him, holding the FTW belt.
Just very briefly, I mean, you could barely see him. He had his hood up and whatever. I couldn't even really get a good look at his face. Was this a known thing before? I mean, I could just be completely clueless or
not to me,
total outsider here, but this is the first I'm ever hearing of Taz having a kid who has any involvement with the business.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a known fact, it wasn't brought up ever on the show itself. So Cody bringing it up here was definitely one of those oh shit, talk about mentioning people's parents, but mentioning your kids, that's even worse.
Yeah, I mean, Taz is so good. Again, he's done this so several times when, he kind of wants to convey that intensity where he just he has the mic in his hand, but he's not even holding it up to his mouth anymore. He's just talking off mic in this very even tone. That was stupid. Why did you do that? You've crossed the line. That was stupid of you. He has that, and he always will have that reality, that intensity, that presence of somebody that you do not want to cross or mess with in a bar or anything like that. I mean, I guess the question for me here is coming out of this is where all these moving parts are going to be kind of going. We have a lot happening here. We have the FTW belt itself. Then we have a physical angle with Cody. Is that pointing to, an actual match with Taz, or is this just pointing towards, his son Hook debuting on AEW in some way? I'm not really sure.
I don't at all see Taz at this point making any sort of comeback in ring, at least not in wrestling capacity. I think the occasional Taz mission here and there is probably as much as we're going to see it from him at this point. I feel like this was all really done to set up a further rivalry between the Nightmare Family and Team Taz. And within that mix, you can, split people like in every sort of way. Like you can involve, of course, like Ricky Starks is deeply involved with like, Cody and Darby Allin and whatnot. But like you got Will Hobbs who can kind of be in there to face like the rest of the members of the Gun Club, perhaps Dustin. And of course, this was also a way to introduce a new character in Taz's son, Hook. So we'll see, like, it's a really interesting dynamic that they've kind of set him up for, because he is, of course, Taz's son, but he's also being trained by Cody. So that little element that they've just created and introduced right here offers a great potential to tell a lot of drama. He is, what is he? He's like Luke Skywalker. Like, do you go with Darth Vader, your father, or do you go with Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Yeah, definitely. It's an angle or a side of the whole, and we've seen it so many times, of a second generation or the child of a wrestler, coming into a company. Obviously, we've seen that many times, and and thank God we're seeing that right now on the main roster, because it gives us John's impressions of Dominic. But but bringing up something seemingly as kind of behind the scenes as training, and which schools and which trainers someone is working with, and whether or not they are ready to sort of step onto the stage or not. Because I mean, like, Hook wasn't presented as a worker, as a wrestler, right? He was just a kid in a hoodie who kind of like followed along behind his dad there, didn't really get involved in any sort of physical way. So the fact that they're sort of beginning the storytelling even before anyone has seen, his son have a match, I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was a fan of this segment. I'm looking forward to this storyline a lot. I mean, if it means more promos between Taz and Cody, who I think are like two of the best in the company, like, sign me right up. So, yeah, we'll see where this one goes. Eddie Kingston is with Eddie Marvez in the back. Kingston says he's not mad about his former best friend for reforming the Death Triangle with Fenix and Pac. He's just disappointed. He says he expected it with Fenix. And then as he's about to tell Pac all the things that have changed since he's left, Jon Moxley walks into frame to interrupt the interview. He stares Eddie Kingston down. And without Mox even saying a word, Kingston looks at him and responds, "You know it wasn't me. You know who it was. You've got your own business to handle." And Mox, without saying a word, just leaves. I really liked how, like, this little kind of like silent, interaction that Jon Moxley had with Eddie Kingston here. He simply walks in, and I think the indication is that just by looking at Eddie Kingston in his face, into his eyes, somebody he knows, he's established as having such a history with, he knows he's a man of his word, and he can tell whether or not he's telling the truth, but just by looking at his face. And then he just leaves and accepts what he says is the truth.
Yeah, this is obviously building on that chemistry, which paid off, so many wonderful dividends over the past few months between them. And I'm glad that they recognize that that's a dynamic that, they can go to even when there's no, possibility of a match, or physical contact between them in the near future. This felt like a nice, much more succinct distillation of the seemingly interminable scenes that were happening back during the Austin, hit and run angle years and years back. Do you remember Austin was constantly walking up to people backstage and just sort of like, did you hit me with a car? And then, the person would go, "I hate your guts, Steve Austin, but it wasn't me." And he'd look at them and go, "Yeah, I can tell you're not lying to me." And he did this dozens and dozens and dozens of times to people that he had no relationship with or whatever. And it was just like, okay, apparently Steve Austin is the world's best judge of character, or, police interrogationist or whatever it might be. The fact that we're only getting it once is fine.
See, I'm thinking more of Elias walking up to Jeff Hardy playing music and interrogating him about hitting him with his car. But yes, I totally get the reference. Yeah. So yeah, no, really, just this seemed to be a way to, not only kind of further the Eddie Kingston thing, but to pivot, to intermingle it with the Mox storyline of continuing to find out who the person is that attacked him. Back into the ring now, we have Top Flight, the recently signed Top Flight, taking on the Hybrid 2, and I suppose this match, I wonder, when these guys would have actually, I guess they would have signed their contract, a week ago, perhaps, maybe even earlier, who knows, but this match being taped a bit earlier, I guess I wonder if it took place before they officially signed or not. But either way, the indication, of course, was that last week after the attack, after their match, this would be eventually a match that we would be receiving either on Dark or Dynamite. We got it on Dynamite the next week. Top Flight versus the Hybrid 2. We see a replay of they replay a portion of Jack Evans from Britt Baker's dentist office where he cuts a promo. Top Flight continued to really impress me with their athleticism and high flying here. They wrestle through a commercial break, and as the action ramps up in the match, Evans attempts to German Dante off the apron. Darius saves him with a step-up enziguri. Darius hits a big tope suicida to the floor, followed immediately by a tope con hero from Dante, ending in a big splash from Dante for a 2 count. Code Red from Dante gets another 2 count, and now with all their partners left on the outside, Angelico hits the Navarro death roll onto Dante, forcing him to tap out to submit in about 10 minutes. Thoughts on the match?
Pretty good. I don't know that it quite had the fluidity or the cohesion of the Bucks match from the previous week, but I mean, the Bucks are kind of getting into that rarefied, can work a great tag match with anybody sort of area there. And as much as, Evans in particular, has a reputation for, a great sort of spot worker here, I don't know that there's necessarily going to be the same complete cohesion throughout. But again, as a showcase for the incredible physical talents of Top Flight, which even, yes, technically they lost, but I almost feel like, I hate to be one of those people that, a loss doesn't matter if you look good in it. But they did get so much in here and did come across as, once again, as they did last week, just such a likable an immediate babyface team with so much physical talent and a good deal of charisma as well. The combination of the first the tope suicida over top, or flipping out of the one bar, they're flipping out of the way to allow the tope suicida to happen. Then the con hero, just all sorts of really, really cool physical stuff that I think we're going to continue to see. If this does indicate that, I guess at least for the time being, Top Flight are on Dynamite to stay.
These two have had 2 matches back-to-back on Dynamite, about 20 minutes in total ring time, and they killed it for every single one of those minutes. Just so incredibly, I would say, exciting to watch. And, as far as we know, yes, this was a tape show, but no real apparent screw-ups, in my opinion, at least, Yes, they are still, I think, very much of the spot monkey variety right now. So perhaps in certain aspects of their games, we still have a lot that we have to see from them. Certainly in terms of promo, I don't really know what they're like at all. In terms of character, I don't know what they're like at all. But as far as the raw athletic ability, it's absolutely there. So, I'm feeling, it seems like AEW tends to maybe some talents, that they immediately put them on air. I'm talking people like Ricky Starks. People like Eddie Kingston, they immediately put them in high-profile roles. I see that less with maybe a younger, inexperienced team like Top Flight. So I see maybe them kind of continuing to develop their act on Dark a little bit more before being completely called up to quote unquote a Dynamite main roster type of role. But I suppose we shall see.
All of the pieces are there. The fact that, just in 2 matches, we've already got a sense not only of what they are as a team, but even a little bit of a sense of their own individual personalities and styles, right? The fact that, Dante seems to be the more kind of high vertical, high flyer, and Darius has a few more of the power spots there. Even something as small as that is already apparent.
After the match, Angelico keeps holding onto the hold, prompting the Bucks to come out for the save. So it seems to be setting into motion TH2 versus the Bucks for a future match. Nyla Rose and Vicky Guerrero are in the back. Vicky is here to give us a lesson about nepotism. And she says Brandy is entirely guilty of it. She says she didn't have to convince Jade Cargill to attack Brandy last week. And I guess at this point, just reiterate some of the players involved in this, including Big Swole. Was there anything else that you might have gotten from this?
I had trouble following this. Yeah, it seemed to be the idea that, we're kind of setting up some sort of like 3-on-3 or 2-on-2 sort of match, and the idea being that, it's the Vicious Vixens or whatever, which I mean, I guess was Vicky intimating that Jade is part of that group, or like that Jade is part of their whole entourage? I wasn't clear on that. Or was she just saying like, oh, people don't like you because you are, this sort of nepotistic person who bosses, your underlings around, and, that's why Cargill went after you, but I didn't have anything to do with it. Just a lot of, if this is really just about, hey, Cargill is teamed up with Vicky and Nyla, that could have been made simpler.
Yeah, I would say that whole aspect was kind of like poorly communicated. The fact that for no reason we just saw Jade Cargill with Nyla and Vicky in a triple team attack on Brandy last week without any sort of like connective tissue about how they started to form that team. Last we saw of Jade Cargill, she was a spokesperson for Shaq. And since then, no real mention of Shaq, of course. So Cody's still juggling that thread while dealing with, at this point, Team Taz. Jade Cargill seems to be off on her own thing right now against, well, I suppose the Brandy thing is a continuation of the whole thing with Cody. So that in itself makes sense. I suppose Vicky Guerrero here was there to explain why she was getting involved. Why? Because she hates nepotism? Is that it?
Yeah, I suppose. It seems like pretty thin characterization for me. But I mean, again, like we were saying last week, I think that theoretically, this Cargill Brandy feud could be interesting. And if we have some stuff happening on the side, with Red Velvet and everybody else that Vicky was mentioning there, sure, fine.
What we really needed this week was to see those three, Vicky, Nyla, and Jade Cargill, on screen together, explaining their association and talking about the attack last week. Just to at least hear a bit more from Jade Cargill about her motivation and why she's paired with these two. So hopefully we get that next week.
Yeah, definitely.
FTR and Tully are in a pre-taped video. They say that they don't really care if the critics say that their match against the Bucks was one of the best ever. It was the worst night of their life. Dax says, just because the Bucks pinned us for 3 seconds, it means that they were the best in the world for those 3 seconds, but it doesn't mean that they are the better team. He says that he needs the tag team titles. And Tully says that it's their destiny to be tag team champions. They will be the next tag team champions, and tells the Bucks to fear the revelation.
Pretty meat and potatoes promo here, kind of what you'd want from a heel tag team coming off of a loss. I don't imagine that they'll be going back to a rematch of that anytime soon, especially with, H2 kind of on the docket here, but it keeps their name in the mix.
It's meat and potatoes, but I mean, this is a team that has kind of like promoted itself as gourmet meat and potatoes. Like, if you're going to have meat and potatoes, you go to the place that does it best, and they're a team that kind of promotes it. What I do kind of like wish to see is a bit more fallout on some of the decisions in the match itself. Like, in particular, what's the guy that's not Dax? Cash Wheeler going for that springboard 450.
Yeah.
Like, follow up on like his screw up there, and how, maybe even talking about the match, like, you guys forced us to have to make that mistake, and it's a mistake we'll never make again. Some reference to the body of the match, I think, would have been a bit nice to hear. But nonetheless, it just seems like it doesn't know. I don't know if it really indicates like the Bucks immediately to rematch FTR, or if it was just simply them, restating their claim for the titles. But I guess keeps them in the conversation.
Yeah.
We got SCU versus Jericho and Jake Hager coming up next. The entire circle, including Wardlow and MJF, are out there. It's the first in-ring meeting between Chris Daniels and Chris Jericho, who have a combined 57 career span between the two. It's a really fast-paced match between these veterans. Action spills to the floor as the Inner Circle beats on Daniels as we go to break. We come back. Jake Hager continues to work over Chris Daniels. Daniels hits a flatliner to Chris Jericho, gets a hot tag to Kaz, and then Kaz pretty much single-handedly takes the Inner Circle out ringside. As Kaz re-enters the ring, Daniels he basically here, sorry, I'm a little bit lost. Daniels tags back in, hits this beautiful tope suicida through the corner to Jake Hager. Hits a big high cross onto Jericho for 2. Something I've noticed in the production is, I don't know if you noticed this too, Bruce. They've started to add little color markers on the bottom of the screen to indicate trunk color.
I didn't notice this until the women's match. Actually, that was the first, in a couple more matches here. That was the first time I saw it. So yeah, I think it's just new this episode. Correct?
I mean, if it appeared last week, I didn't notice it.
Yeah,
but it's, of course, like boxing does this, UFC does this, just to tell you, like, if you're a first time viewer, who's wearing what color trunks. I think it's great. I mean, as far as like, people complaining about the sports like presentation, I mean, this is definitely, something more along those lines.
Yep.
Encourages new viewers to be engaged, and it encourages your tag teams to dress in uniform colors, which I always enjoy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So at this point, Hager hits a diving flatliner. Daniels hits a diving flatliner to Hager. It's really hard to keep up with these matches, everybody. There's a lot going on in them. Daniels then hits a BME for a 2 count, and with the referee distracted, MJF on the outside decks Daniels with the diamond ring, Judas effect from Jericho, and Hager pins Daniels for the win.
Pretty great stuff here, especially when you think, when you look at, particularly, I think, the age of somebody like Daniels, who's turning 50 or has turned 50 this year, and, Kaz and Jericho as well, right? Like, it's kind of rare that you'd sort of look at this match and kind of go, okay, people of Jericho, Kaz, and Daniels' age, and kind of go, yeah, Hager's going to be Hager's going to have to work to keep up with these guys.
Kid.
But it's true. But he did, right? He was very clearly the odd man out here in terms of just bouncing.
Jake Hager is 38.
Oh, is he? Okay,
yeah.
All right. He's hardly a whippersnapper anymore, I suppose. But yeah, just incredible stuff, specifically from the SCU side of the ring. I thought, it's weird to sort of, I don't know if it's weird, but if you pay attention to the win-loss record and kind of look at how they're used on Dark, Daniels especially has taken a lot of pins, and there's been a real sort of kind of sliding him down the ladder towards being kind of the veteran gatekeeper that the hot new young guy has to get past, to earn some respect. It's a pretty far slide for him. Given that just a year ago or a little over a year ago, we were talking about him being one of the inaugural tag champions for AEW's, tag team belts here.
Was he technically a champion though, or was that Sky and Kaz?
Wait, hang on. Was he not in the actual one where they won the belts?
I don't think so. I think they always recognized Kaz and I don't think they had Freebird rule. I think it was always Kaz and Sky, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't quite remember when the whole Daniels injury angle, if that had happened before or after they won the belts for the first time. But regardless, I think that a match like this really shows you just how much there is left in the tank, both physically and in terms of in-ring storytelling for somebody like Daniels. I mean, I wasn't watching ROH at the time, but I remember a few years ago, everybody talking about just how incredible and legit, his last title run in ROH seemed. And, obviously the very, very grizzled veteran, is a story that sort of writes itself. So I would really like to see a sort of a singles run for Daniels kind of being pushed to his last attempt to, get the TNT title or possibly even the world title somewhere down the line.
I really would too. But at this point, given I think Daniels, involvement in doing so much in a backstage role, it almost feels like he's just kind of in that Dustin Rhodes role, maybe even less so than Dustin, where he'll only wrestle if it's kind of being a part of a 3-way with SCU or maybe the occasional tag, and not somebody who, at least demands or maybe might be even considered for any sort of prime singles storyline. Of course, the idea of doing that retirement thing is always there. I think it's a great story that they've done in the past with Daniels that he'll do a great job of again. They might have to wait for it, but man, this match absolutely proves that there's still so much left in the tank. It's incredible. I had trouble keeping up with this match because this was such a fast match. And we're talking about a median age of probably 45 or 46 between these guys. It was honestly I thought it was amazing, seeing Daniels move, seeing Jericho move, and I thought it was a tag match that, lived up to every bit of a standard of an AEW tag team pace that they set.
And that cool little bit of trivia about it being the first time that Jericho and Daniels have actually crossed paths is pretty cool, right? I mean, for years, everybody was always saying, Daniels is the greatest wrestler of that generation to have never worked with, or at least signed a contract with, either WCW or the WWE, right? But he was wrestling everywhere else. And so when you think about where Jericho's career has taken him, I guess it does make sense, but it's still incredible to me that the two people with the resumes that they have never stepped in at the same time.
Afterwards, Kaz, seeing the injustice here, clocks MJF, which actually draws blood from MJF's mouth. Sky also comes out with a chair for the save, so this feud between SCU and the Inner Circle seems to be continuing.
Sorry to interrupt. Obviously we were expecting the Sky run in there, and it sounds like based on Dark, we're still having Sky and Spears. That's still a program that's happening. But again, if we're talking about people that we kind of like to see do a bit of a singles run, I would really like to see that for Scorpio as well. I wouldn't have necessarily felt super comfortable bringing it up myself a week or two ago, but I kind of wanted to echo Nate's thoughts. I believe it was on Monday, talking about the on one hand, obviously how cool it is to see a lot of younger black tag teams coming into the AEW mix, but that there is still sort of this question of, okay, well, who is going to be the first single star to get a real push?
Oh, man, Sky, I think, has been long overdue.
Yeah.
I really don't know what there is left for him to accomplish on Dark. I don't think, it's any sort of hook or draw to get people to watch Dark and, to have a Scorpio Sky versus Sean Spears big feud there. I think he's way more valuable in the upper mix of an AEW Dynamite. So, man, I'm a little disappointed that they haven't really pulled the trigger on him yet after several very good notable main events, matches against, Chris Jericho. I think he had a match against Cody for the TNT title, but I definitely feel like it's long overdue that he gets involved in a proper storyline with a proper singles push. Sabian, Miro, and Ford are in their trailer as Kip Sabian's about to show off his new Xbox. This is the Xbox. What do they call this one? Xbox X? What do they call it?
I don't know. I'm a PlayStation guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can count those things. I know. I don't know what's happening with
in
the
Xbox. Microsoft world. It's nothing, and then one, and then 360. Wait, it's 360 and then 1. I think. What is it? I need to know. Is it Xbox Black? What the hell? What is it? Xbox.
I mean, it makes about as much sense as the Windows operating system, naming back in the 2000s did.
Okay, what is it? It's the Xbox Series X. Is that it? So stop shouting at your phones, everybody. I don't really care. It's fine. Okay, so he's playing with his new Xbox. They're about to show off. And then Orange Cassidy simply walks in and he just turns the system off. This draws... sounds so stupid. This draws Sabian and Miro into a brawl with the Best Friends outside of the trailer. Best Friends powerbomb Sabian into a porta potty. Not into a porta potty, onto a porta potty on the outside. It wasn't that messy. This is not the WWE. Miro has a really funny moment where he just grabs the camera and he starts yelling, "Move out of the way!" And this seemed to be their way of promoting the Dynamite Diamond Battle Royal for next week, which, according to the graphic, seems to indicate that it might be as well for a ring. I don't know if this is for MJF's ring or if it's going to be for a new one, but MJF is going to be in this one too.
It is. I looked it up. It is a year since that battle royal that MJF won there. As far as this segment itself, okay, look, I want to recant something I said a few minutes ago. A few minutes ago, I gave Kenny Omega some grief for the "my dad can beat up your dad" thing. I have to sort of say that trolling somebody or getting under somebody's skin by turning a console off while they're playing it is even more elementary school level BS that I just don't see having any place in what is theoretically a big time Major League Wrestling promotion. I really don't need any more of this, or at least I really don't need any more of it to have anything to do with video games at this point.
Yeah, like the action of like Orange Cassidy simply walking in and hitting the power button to annoy somebody, like that's very much Orange Cassidy. That absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the idea of like these adults getting so angry about their video game for any reason that like I just think is certainly not becoming of like a serious pro wrestling tag team. Certainly below like somebody the potential of Miro.
Yeah.
So
he's just wasting away, and it's just treading water, at this point. Yeah.
Contract signing number 2, the redo with Mox and Kenny Omega. Kenny, his grand entrance, this time talking a whole lot about his Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame induction. He's about to enter. The cleaner girls are out there. You see Kenny in the silhouette at the ramp, but as you see him, in walks Jon Moxley silhouette, who starts attacking Kenny from behind. They brawl out into the ring. Mox continues to beat on Kenny Omega, hitting the paradigm shift onto Omega, right onto the championship belt. Moxley grabs the mic. He says, "Gentleman's agreement." Right. Mox says, "I don't know who you hired last week, Kenny, but they did a piss poor job. I'm still walking." He says, "I thought our beef was squashed a year ago, but then you had to go and piss me off." He says, "The only way you can prove who you say you are is for you to do something that no one has been able to do in 18 months. Beat Jon Moxley." He says, "Win, lose, or draw, winner is coming for you, Kenny," as Mox signs the contract. What do you think of the promo in the segment?
Overall, pretty good. I think, like I was saying earlier, it underlines the idea that this is now a feud about Omega needing to defeat Moxley in order to get out from this perception, whether it's him talking or whether it's people online or whatever it is, whether it's accurate or not, this perception that he isn't what he once was, that he hasn't lived up to his potential in AEW, right? That he's not the same guy that he was in NJPW. Whether that's accurate or not, that's become what Kenny needs to prove to himself. And I like the fact that Moxley sort of put that in his court, right? The onus is on you to do this. The onus is on you to make me shut up. The onus is on you to prove that you are who everybody says you are. I like that as a hook for this particular feud here. I mean, it's a minor point here, but how weird must it be? This is just a little tangent here. How weird must it be to be Jim Cornette and be watching the whole, Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame intro and know that it's entirely created just to troll you? Like this is entirely being set up so that him hate watching it is going to get under his skin with him being.
What were the lines like?
It was all just he is a Wrestling Observer Hall of Famer, which means that a group of his peers, including current wrestlers and former wrestlers and authorities within the field of professional wrestling, have declared him to be a Hall of Famer. It seemed to me, at least, to be a very clear, like just trying to rub salt in Cornette's wounds after he got in a snit about Omega going in. The Observer Hall of Fame there.
I don't pay a whole lot of attention to him these days, unfortunately. He's just
it's
off on his own thing.
It's not even worth it. Another minor point here. How do you feel about this Winter is Coming pitch for next week's show?
It's not I would say like the immediately recognizable name of, let's say, like beach bash at the beach or War Games or something like that. Winter is Coming doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue as well, but I mean, I don't dislike it. I will say, like, in a week, 2 weeks, I don't know if it feels as grand as I think I would have expected it to feel, given that this was Kenny versus Mox.
Yeah, it's just it's a bit of a weird thing to be suggesting, given that the way that Game of Thrones ended. I don't know if that's something that you'd be wanting to connote with this particular.
I'm not a Game of Thrones fan.
Oh yeah, no, okay, yeah. Winter is Coming was like the dire threat that they kept saying for season after season after season, and Moxley even like conflated that with different HBO prestige stuff when he said, "Come at the king, you best not mix." And it's like, we've got Game of Thrones, we've got The Wire happening here. It's all very it's all very busy.
Does it actually snow in Jacksonville?
Good question. Probably. Right? I can't think so.
Kenny has mentioned that it's incredibly cold there right now, like wrestling. So, or at least it's like it went from being really hot to like all of a sudden being chilly and cold. So I don't know if that's exactly winter, at least not a Canadian version of winter, but
well, I'll trust somebody from Winnipeg, right? Like they know winter, so I'll take his word for it.
That's very true. Yeah. So the other thing that we haven't really mentioned yet. Do you think that this was meant to be a clear indication that it was Kenny Omega who set up the attack?
No, I think that was sort of Mox jumping the gun there. I think we might get, Mox's accusation that, you hired someone to do it because, presumably this happened while Kenny was out in the ring. Okay, fine. That's a sort of a workable premise for Moxley to be on there. But if that is it, I do think that's jumping over a hell of a lot of story that should be doubled back on. So I think you could definitely do something where if we do see Omega defeating Moxley for the title next week, then we find out afterwards, no, this was somebody else entirely who has a bone to pick with Moxley, possibly, a returning Brody or whoever else it might be. It could be an entire other story that is going to be sending Moxley off. Or hell, God, if we want to really go down the conspiracy hole here, this might be the sort of thing that allows him, to take time off and go to Japan if he is going to do Wrestle Kingdom. Who knows?
You mean if he loses?
If he loses, yeah. I've sort of been assuming that if he does lose, we might, then the possibility opens up of him being able to go to Japan, do quarantine, and do the U.S. title match at Wrestle Kingdom. I don't know.
I'm curious to see like how Kenny is handled following this, because I agree with you that I think this was Moxley jumping the gun, and ultimately it will be revealed that it wasn't Kenny. And if that's the case, this kind of positions Kenny as being framed. Or at least, improperly, unjustly punished for a crime he did not commit, which indicates to me that he is continuing to stay as a babyface that you're supposed to feel sympathetic for. And coming off of this win, are we going to see a Kenny Omega babyface run, or is it going to be, more this kind of overtly cocky heel run that is a full-on heel, or just maybe somebody who's overconfident?
I think, yeah. I think he could maintain. Him continuing to protest his innocence and then kind of rubbing it in everybody's face after the fact, if he is innocent, that could go in well enough with this current iteration of the character, which could really lean either way, depending on who you want to pair him up with next as the next world challenger, right? Depending on whether he's going to be going up against a heel or a face coming after next week.
The Inner Circle is in the back with Alex Marvez. MJF is pissed. He says, "What kind of man sucker punches another man in the face?" After, of course, he did the same to Chris Daniels in the match earlier. Jericho says, after a fair and square victory, Kaz dares to put his hands on MJF. Jericho says the fun and games with the Inner Circle are over. Next week, for the first time, Kaz versus Jericho.
This is a match that if you told me about it 2 days ago, I would have said, oh, yeah, sure, fine. But hell, after watching that tag match, sure, sign me up for an extra little dose of this. I think the other thing that was obviously that we didn't really talk about in the tag match, but that was being pointed to in this segment as well, is this image of a unified Inner Circle, right? They've gone to Vegas. They've gotten their yayas out. Jericho said, we're done with kind of partying. We're going back to just kicking everybody on the roster's ass, and seeing the visual of seeing this many guys all united, all together, theoretically unstoppable, and that somebody like Kaz or whoever they end up sort of focusing their attention on is going to get absolutely annihilated by them.
This is like the fun chapter of the group. Like if you remember like the Kevin Owens, Chris Jericho thing, like this was like when they were being best friends and just like doing goofy shit. The potential for this portion, I think, is going to be a lot of fun before, of course, the inevitable turn. Up next for the AEW Women's Championship, we have Anna Jay taking on champion Hikaru Shida, and we first get a video package building up the match. Anna Jay says that she's a totally different wrestler now than the first time that these two wrestled. Shida says her knee, like Shida basically is asked about her knee following the Nyla Rose match, or Nyla Rose, man, I'm getting the two mixed up, Nyla Rose match, and Shida basically, pretends like, but she says it's fine, but it's really not. Tay Conti, the tag team partner of Anna Jay, talks about her friendship with Anna, and she says that they make each other better. Shida says what Jay needs isn't the AEW championship, it's more heart, and she says bring it. I was really happy to see, finally some sort of storytelling here with Hikaru Shida and some of the other members of the AEW women's division who don't really get that much screen time. It was good to hear Shida like continue to emote more and more in her promos. I thought she did really well here. To me, she's clearly capable of a whole lot more than they're giving her. It was also good for me to see Tay Conti like be able to kind of speak up about her relationship with Anna Jay and their tag team as well. So I would have loved to have seen this perhaps a week ago, just to give us a bit more time to anticipate this match rather than seeing it right before the match itself. But I do hope it's an indicator that AEW is like finally perhaps putting some attention to their fans' criticism about the lack of storytelling in the division.
Yeah, this is exactly the sort of thing that I think you and I have been just kind of like beating the drum about for the past few weeks here. The fact that the matches, Shida's matches and defenses are perfectly serviceable to good, but that there doesn't seem to be any sort of drive or story behind them. Yeah, it would have been nice if this had cropped up a week earlier, or if this had been peppered through the episode, right? With, obviously hearing from Jay and Conti, but maybe also like being reminded of the various other challengers that Shida has defeated and why Jay thinks she is different from them or better than them. We could kind of nitpick it, but the overall approach and the overall attempt here was definitely a move in the right direction.
In the match itself, the rest of the Dark Order are ringside. We get a tilt-a-whirl early on from Hikaru Shida that is injures Shida's existing knee injury. Shida further injures it by attempting a knee lift on the outside, which allows Jay to gain control. Anna Jay shouts at Tay Conti to give her a chair to use. Rick Knox quickly takes the chair away, but this was all a way for Jay to grab a kendo stick from a member of the Dark Order to use it on Shida's knee, giving her a 2 count. Jay locks in her Queenslayer rear naked choke. Shida escapes, hits a brainbuster, then a straightjacket German, continuing to favor that injured knee. Finally, Shida hits the Tamashi, using the injured knee again, giving Shida the victory in about 7 minutes' time.
I thought this was pretty good. It wasn't maybe entirely up to the snuff, kind of bell to bell, as some of the other Shida defenses, but we did get to see a little bit of extra fire from her. I thought that, the story with the knee, obviously gave her something to work with, and obviously the story with Conti on the outside and the chair and everything like that, giving Jay something to work with. Full disclosure here, by the way, for whatever reason, the TSN feed that I was watching did not have the picture-in-picture, so I missed out on a good portion of this match, but at least I got to hear the Sleep Country Canada theme, which is always a patriotic plus. So anyway,
why buy a mattress anywhere else?
Bing.
Yeah, I thought this was a far more competitive and confident Anna Jay this time around. I mean, like turning heel tends to like bring that out of especially your younger talent. This, to me, I thought was a match that otherwise could have been just a throwaway match between a champion and somebody who's still really at the bottom of the ladder in terms of her career or experience, or at least status on the roster. But I thought it ended up being a pretty hard fought victory for Shida, allowing her to tell that knee injury story. And for Anna Jay, I thought it was a major step up in her being taken seriously as a competitor in the division. She's still very far from championship level, but I think she's made some really good strides since her last match with Shida. So it's one of those matches that I think she'll probably learn a great deal from and improve greatly out of.
And they've done enough. They've done enough groundwork with her and Conti's relationship and friendship over the past couple of months that this program that they're going to move into between the two of them, feels organic and natural. It feels like it's coming from somewhere.
After the match, as Shida makes her way up the ramp, Abaddon crawls out, blood just dripping out of her mouth. She grabs Shida's belt and just starts licking it with her blood-soaked mouth, getting nasty blood-filled droplets all over this thing. And they cut to Shida, who gives just this absolutely great look of horror as she's watching this horror movie come to life. So this, of course, Abaddon was scheduled to be a part of something earlier before she was injured, and she seems to be okay, and she's restarting that push right now. So it's a character I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing more of.
Yeah, it's I haven't been completely blown away by Abaddon's in-ring on Dark, but it's a fun enough and cheesy enough sort of character that you can spend some time with. And the fact that I guess we're kind of going into this whole Shida taking her seriously and being legitimately creeped out or intimidated by this living dead girl zombie sort of character here. Again, if we've been talking about trying to give Shida something to work with character-wise in her feuds and her matches, this is at least something to start with.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it'll be tricky, like being a baby face and selling for like this kind of horror movie thing. Like you have to, traditionally, okay, we've seen The Undertaker go up against any number of people, whether it be Kamala or Yokozuna or like people that have to pretend that they're afraid of like this demon. And that often works when, it's the baby face that is the demon and it's the heel, especially a giant heel who is not really afraid of anything, but afraid of this, ghost. It's a little bit trickier when you're the baby face in the feud, having to sell fear for, this kind of mythical, like, it's a horror movie thing. There's going to have to be a way where they have to show the heroism in Shida overcoming like those fears that you're going to want to you're going to want to cheer her for.
Yeah, it's a difficult needle to thread. I think we saw kind of the downside of that in the Brian Kane program that Brian went into immediately after WrestleMania 31, if I'm remembering correctly, with Kane threatening his wife and everything, and a lot of kind of.
You have a good memory, man. I don't remember that stuff at all.
I only remember that because I was actually at WrestleMania, WrestleMania 30. No, excuse me, sorry, my mistake. This is after. Yes, this is after WrestleMania 30 because it's 30 where Brian wins, right?
Yes. So what like wasn't like Team Hell No before all that?
Well, Hell No was well before that, but this is before the Hell No reunion from a couple of years previous. Gotcha. So if I'm remembering correctly, yeah. So it's WrestleMania 30 where Brian gets, defeats Hunter and then Randy, and then gets goes immediately into the Kane program and then is injured shortly thereafter. There was a bunch of stuff with like forklifts and everything. It wasn't good. But anyway, my point in all of that was that, you had somebody who was this conquering baby face immediately now having to be this kind of, cowering slasher movie victim figure constantly running away from, the big bad monster. And we'll see how Shida handles it, I guess.
I'm looking forward to the feud. I think there's good potential there. I just want to see like Hikaru Shida chase Abaddon around with a sword. Like, give me a scene like that. Matt Hardy's in the back. He is playing this brand new, like, cocky, overconfident character, like taking credit for everything. Like he's been playing it on BTE, playing it on Twitter. Had a great tweet the other day taking great credit for like creating the cinematic match with Matt capitalized in cinematic. It's ridiculous. He says he's overcome insurmountable odds in 2020, and if he can do it, he said something insulting about the audience, which I think was
you can obviously overcome your pedestrian challenges.
Yes,
that was the note I had here. Yeah,
I have to say this has been a really sudden, like, kind of unexplained heel turn for Matt coming off of the Sammy Guevara match, but I find it very entertaining.
I mean, I'm okay with it. I mean, he's calling himself, what is it? Is it the iconic Matt Hardy now? I guess, we've sort of, you and John have talked about kind of how aimless Matt has sort of felt on AEW, just kind of cycling through broken, not broken, whichever Matt Hardy, I'm here, being a mentor to Private Party or whoever it might be. If this is sort of a hard reset after what I thought was a pretty disappointing cinematic match, sure, fine. It cleans the palate and gives him something new to start with, and we'll see where he goes with it, I guess.
So next week, winter's coming. We've got the Dynamite Diamond Battle Royal. We've got Chris Jericho versus Frankie Kazarian. They also announced here Britt Baker versus returning Layla Hirsch. We've got Ricky Starks and Powerhouse Hobbs taking on Darby Allin and Cody Rhodes. And of course, in our main event for the AEW World Championship, Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega. Team Taz comes out. Team Taz is in the back. Ricky Starks at this point speaks for Taz, who has left the building in a fit of rage. Starks says he has no beef with Tony Khan, He in fact says Tony Khan puts them in main events, pays the group well, but he has beef with Cody. He says Cody crossed the line tonight. Stark says Cody begged Tony Khan to cut Taz's mic. He's made their feud personal by bringing up Taz's kid, and next week they're going to get their revenge. How did you think that Ricky Stark sounded here with, being flanked by the two powerhouses behind him?
The visual of it is great. Let's just acknowledge that, right? That this is, even without Taz in the mix, this is a fantastic looking group that we have right here. And yeah, obviously at this point, I think everybody should be expecting Starks to be completely, buttery smooth on the mic. I think Taz was calling him hot peanut butter in terms of how smooth he was on Dark. Occasionally, you put some peanut butter on toast and it sort of heats up a bit. It's
hot peanut butter. Okay.
Yeah, very smooth and oily, I guess. But yeah, very slick. We didn't hear anything from Hobbs. I mean, you'll notice that Taz sort of kind of shooed him out of the ring immediately after his squash win there. So we still haven't really heard this new incarnation of Hobbs on the mic yet. But yeah, the best heels are always the ones who have at least some ground to stand on in terms of the arguments that they're making. And whether we, quote, believe him or not, Stark sounds credible here, putting forward his case, of kind of envy and anger towards Cody here, right? I think they've done a really nice job of when they bring Cody into these feuds, and specifically this ongoing feud with Team Taz, the fact that, they can the Team Taz can play the aggrieved party, in opposition to somebody who has the proverbial pen, right? Has control over things, is, kind of, orchestrating the whole show here. And you'll notice that, Starks was differentiating Cody from Tony, right? Tony treats us with respect and has done this and this and that, but you've obviously got an axe to grind with us and we're coming for you. We were talking last week about the chemistry that Cody has with Darby. I'm really, really excited for this match. I think it'll be a good one.
Yeah, me too. I love seeing Ricky Starks in this role. This was an indicator of what the team would perhaps sound like in the future if Taz, for whatever reason, was no longer a part of the group. It allowed Brian Cage to speak up a little bit more. And less, I think, continues to be more with Brian Cage. Yep. He doesn't need to be saying a whole lot. Just needs to chime in here and there with some words and just look menacing. But Starks looks great with these two giants next to him. Man, that was awesome. So our main event, of course, is Butcher and the Blade taking on Pac and Fenix, stemming from last week's reunion of the Death Triangle. Eddie Kingston is back on commentary. We get double dives from Death Triangle early on. Fenix attempts an Oz cutter. Butcher just stonewalls him, and Fenix just bounces off. But Pac follows right up with a super kick to lay the Butcher out. Commercial break. We come back with Pac going for a shooting star press. Blade moves out of the way, but Pac lands on his feet and then steps into a great looking snap power slam from the Blade. Dr. Bomb from the Blade for 2. As Fenix stands up top, Eddie Kingston steps away from commentary while the bunny distracts, sweeping Fenix off the top rope, allowing Butcher and the Blade to apply their combo neckbreaker / powerbomb to Fenix for the victory.
Pretty good, I think. We were talking before about the previous tag, kind of Hager being the odd man out in this very fast-moving tag match. Here it was, Butcher kind of being the, oh, geez, I just have to, stand still and not get in the way too much sort of base there. Obviously, great flying work from Fenix and from Pac here. This, I don't know, I'm not sure if they explained this on commentary or not. Maybe you caught it, Way. Did they explain why Penta didn't get involved or take out Kingston after Kingston's interference there?
Yeah, you're right. He just kind of disappeared because he was ringside. And
got a chyron and everything, yeah.
I was very focused on taking notes for these things, so a lot of I didn't even notice that Penta was not around. But did he get attacked? He probably got laid out by Butcher and the Blade, right?
Probably. If so, I didn't catch it though. I don't know. A lot of moving parts. But theoretically, if you've got just Pac and Fenix out there with Penta as an equalizer, theoretically that's taking care of Kingston. Unless there was something to do with Bunny that I missed. I don't know.
There must have been. Maybe it was even something during the picture-in-picture that we would have missed too, because we didn't get to see it in Canada, unfortunately. But as far as the match goes, I I really enjoyed it. I thought Butcher and the Blade in particular, like they've really increased their presence so much in AEW this year. Every week I'm very impressed by the team to the point where like it almost feels normal to see them be a constant in these main events where you'll know they're always deliver quality. So they continue to be really good. And to me though, the standout was of course seeing Fenix and Pac together. It's refreshing, number one, to see Fenix like just wrestle as a straight up babyface now, taking full advantage of his incredible tools. But the pairing of him and Pac, like they work so fast together. Like on their own individually, they're two great technical singles wrestlers who like wrestle at incredible speed. But as a tag team, like it almost feels like that speed doubles because nobody has to take a break. So as a team alone, I think they're actually like fantastic together. So like that trios match that we're gonna get someday between the Death Triangle and the team of Butcher, Blade, and Kingston, that to me is something I already have way more anticipation for. It's something I think you could say for a pay-per-view or at least headline a Dynamite with.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there was those. I believe it was like kind of like stereo moonsaults from the top rope to the outside that both of them did at one point that just looked gorgeous. And yeah, I mean, it reminds you of just obviously again the natural babyface power that Fenix has, but just as much as we're sort of saying, yeah, Pac kind of looks and still can sort of do some heelish character work there. His experience all over the world in Dragon Gate and whatnot just has him primed to be able to keep up this absolutely frantic pace throughout this.
After the match, Eddie Kingston attacks with the steel chair, laying out the Death Triangle. And as Bruce mentioned, we didn't really notice where Penta was, but there was probably a decent explanation for it. But then Lance Archer comes out. And he starts to attack Eddie Kingston and his team. The rest of Eddie Kingston's group comes in. Phoenix and Pac at this point come back in. Everybody brawls with each other. Archer continues to threaten Eddie Kingston as the announcers bring up how it's been personal for these two since the anniversary show and the all-out battle royal. So, I don't sense that this was indicating any sort of like babyface turn for Lance Archer. Maybe more just a way for these two heels to feud with each other. But we talk about how like in the Cody stories there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of feuds that are kind of concurrently running at the same time. I felt the same way here, where I was just starting to build my anticipation for Pac and Phoenix against Eddie Kingston, but then all of a sudden Lance Archer kind of comes in, especially as a heel facing another heel, to really kind of confuse the dynamic. So I felt that the show kind of went off air with like, a bit more of an awkward end rather than like something that was maybe just communicated perhaps that much more clearly.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was sort of the same feeling that I left with it. I mean, I was even wondering if just having Archer deliver a couple of kicks to either Phoenix or Penta or Pac just to communicate, no, I'm not out here to team with these guys. I'm just out here to get some licks in at Kingston. Obviously, the commentary was doing their level best to go, oh, right, these guys have crossed swords before in the past. But to be honest, as somebody I watched the product. I was like, oh, right. Yeah, I guess I sort of remember that, but it just seemed like an odd thread to pick up here in the middle of, as you're saying, what is kind of, has been built up to be a main event match, for two, or at least this week, and was obviously a very high profile match in Pac's return last week, right? Like there's a lot of focus on this feud right now. So adding in Archer as a third wheel seems kind of odd to me. They've been doing a lot of mic work with Archer on Dark lately, like having him just kind of come out from the back, throwing, jabronis or workers from the back around, not even having him do squash matches anymore. Cause what's the point? He doesn't even need to, just coming out and sort of, cutting promos in the middle of the ring. So I don't know if that's sort of been like leading up towards him trying to get into a sort of war of words with Eddie Kingston over the next little while, which, that's a challenge for him.
So Eddie Kingston's got Lance Archer. He's like, clearly got something with Penta and Pac and Phoenix at the moment. So he's juggling a couple programs, and I guess that probably is coming after winter is coming. But what is your anticipation level for next week?
I mean, pretty high. Even though, as we're saying, some parts of the Omega Mox feud have sort of been maybe maybe complicated by this attack angle and who's involved with that. Even, in spite of that, the whole arc that Kenny has been going on for the past few months is something I'm really, really excited for. And the fact that they've fleshed it out with what looks to be a pretty solid card underneath that, I think is, again, an indicator of this shift that we're seeing both on AEW, and on main roster WWE to a degree, of sort of effectively having like a mini, pay-per-view on television. And when we're talking about AEW, who are only doing 4 pay-per-views per year, when they are giving proper builds towards the matches that are happening on that, TV show, pay-per-view level show, I'm perfectly fine with that. And I think they've done a good job of building most of these matches that we're going to see next week.
I think AEW's actually kind of like almost pioneered that formula of like, using their TV shows to build to significant additions in place of like, the monthly pay-per-view. And I have to say, like, I'm of course looking forward to the match next week. I don't know if I'm excited for it as I thought I would be. Like, I thought, the moment that they announced Mox versus Omega to headline the show, I thought they were going to stack the rest of this show with like a pay-per-view caliber undercard. And not to say this is a bad like card underneath at all, but to me it feels like more of a glorified edition of Dynamite, less so, a free pay-per-view that we're getting on TV, which I feel like they've kind of hit in the past, at least that status. But nonetheless, it's like the main event is going to be the hook for everybody. You almost have the excuse of like, well, they don't really need to try for like the rest of it, or at least not try as hard as you might think that they need to, because Mox and Omega is sure to invite such a big crowd. Do you think that they can crack 1 million?
I mean, if there's any week to do it, you'd think this would be it. I imagine, the news coverage, which has been pulling away at least some portion of the audience, that has to have died down by this point. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't think that NXT has announced any big, conscious counter programming to it. So, if they are capable of, cracking 1 million right now, I think this would definitely be the time to do it. Yeah.
I think it's their biggest shot that they've taken. I mean, certainly on an opposed edition of Dynamite. The last time they did do 1 million was back in September, and that might have been one of the unopposed ones. I could be absolutely wrong. But that featured a TNT title match between Brody Lee and Dustin Rhodes. So certainly in terms of card, like a way more important one this time around. And I don't know, something tells me that like, I think the wrestling fan is still kind of set in their ways that like, if you, for whatever reason, over the past year and a half, didn't decide to watch AEW over NXT last week, I don't know if you're going to do it this week. Man, I'm going to say just shy of 1 million, maybe over 900,000, but shy of 1 million. So let's go to the forum right now, forum.postwrestling.com, where we invite our patrons to leave feedback after every edition of Raw, SmackDown, and Dynamite. Would you care to join me again, Bruce?
Absolutely.
So out of 10, what did you guys think of Dynamite? 7.87. We start off with Aaron from Brampton, who says, first of all, congratulations to John and his family for their latest edition. As for Dynamite, I think AEW missed a chance to do something interesting with the women's division. Between every title holder in AEW, WWE, Impact, and ROH, Hikaru Shida must be the most bland champion. I think the entire title scene could use a shakeup. Having Anna Jay and the Dark Order hold the belt could have made for a more interesting television. With Brody Lee gone, it would be neat to see her take over the whole stable. If I had to guess, it appears they might hold off on a title switch until Shida versus Baker happens. Yeah. I don't really disagree that like the Dark Order with any sort of championship belt would be a lot of fun, especially if you have somebody like John Silver being some sort of like spokesperson for Anna Jay in addition to it.
Yeah.
But Anna Jay is just simply not there yet. Yeah. I think it's way too early for her for a position like that. Maybe in 2 years, maybe even in a year if she progresses fast enough. But yeah.
We go to MJ, who says, tonight's show highlights two things for me. One, the depth of talent on this roster to have TV-level matches, TH2, SCU, the main event. Two, how much is going on in AEW storytelling. Now, that's not to say all the storytelling is good, but consider how long this Archer-Eddie feud has been simmering, which brings me to my next point. JR is so unequipped to be calling the show, it's not funny anymore. To act just as clueless as he does a year into Dynamite, can we move past good old JR as being an additive part of the show? The Mox promo tonight might have been one of the best promos of his generation. Maybe not since Punk have I believed a guy to be on the top of wrestling like Mox is right now, which makes it the perfect time for him to lose. Sure. I mean, there's been a few times when I feel as though JR has been sort of lagging behind a little bit, and especially when we're talking about even hell, like an SCU match that you're not expecting to be some crazy spot fest PWG type match, which it ended up being. I have a friend who has kind of gotten back into AEW over the past month or two, and he sort of has made sort of similar comments, just sort of saying, thinking that, he does kind of sound a little bit behind with it right now.
I don't know if it's just like me, perhaps being so consumed with the action as I'm taking the notes, but I honestly haven't really even tuned in so much to some of the specific commentary. If there are any glaring mistakes that JR made on this show, I wasn't as aware of it. I don't really see a point unless it was something completely offensive that he said on air, or at least continued to say on air, that they would take Jim Ross off. I think they just have such a reverence for him. I think Tony Khan does. I think Cody does. That I think as long as JR can perform at the current level that he can, they probably really appreciate, him being able to lend his voice, lend his, notoriety, and just to lend his star power and just the legacy of, I think, that sound of his voice to the show. And that, to me, I think is something that they're willing to exchange, perhaps completely accurate, up-to-date commentary for, when you're somebody like Excalibur, they know can provide that.
If there's a clear, kind of balance of work or division of labor in terms of Excalibur being the play-by-play guy, if that's something that's understood, yeah.
We got Andrew from Cape Breton, who says, with more and more people signing with AEW every week, I'm sometimes seeing this criticism that they have too many people and there isn't enough TV time to go around. While this is true, the biggest positive I find is that every match seems fresh. They could cycle wrestlers in and out, and while the company certainly has their group of people who are the main stars of the show, each week seems fresh. I enjoyed tonight's match-heavy show, and they were able to showcase some talent who aren't often seen. While I say this, I do understand some issues that can come with such a large talent roster. For instance, I wish Abaddon had more time to establish herself, as I think she was only on Dynamite once, even before her injury a few weeks back. That said, overall great show. 8 new PS5s out of 10. Speaking of which, I now have in my head canon, that Lana bought Miro his new PS5 with the money she would have received for being on the winning Survivor Series team. Okay, first of all, it was a Xbox Series X, I believe, right? Or is he suggesting that Miro also has a PS5?
Oh, come on. He's we're talking about serious gamers here, where they are definitely both system, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. When they were dead broke, they couldn't picture this type guys at this point in the game. Yeah. We move on to Noah from Vaughn, who says, first off, a huge congrats to John on the newest addition to the Pollock family. The show tonight was so damn fun. Abaddon making her return was just perfect. She's one of my favorites in the women's division, and glad she's getting some spotlight now. The Taz Cody segment was fantastic and felt so real. Between his role on Dark and Dynamite, Taz has really been fantastic in 2020. Moxley versus Omega next week has me feeling so conflicted. On the one hand, Mox has been having such a great world title reign, but on the other hand, Kenny being on top of the promotion he's in feels just right. Either way, should be a fantastic match next week. Who do you guys think wins next week? 8.5 show tonight. Kind of, echoing what sort of what MJ was saying there about, this is the way that hopefully a world title match should feel, right? Where you feel as though neither guy can afford to lose, and yet you also have some assurance that one of them will, that you will get a clean finish. I mean, I'm very much on record as thinking that the time is right to pull the trigger and put Omega in the spot. I'm not sure if you feel the same way, or if you feel that there's any chance that they do some sort of screwy fucked finish on this next week.
I think there's definitely a chance, and I think when we talk about like a screwy fuck finish for AEW, I don't think it's going to be as simple as what is it? The Fiend shows up in the crowd, the lights go out, and then we get a roll up. Like, I don't think it's going to be that. I think it might be hopefully something a bit more creative, and a bit more shocking, maybe even. But I don't discount that possibility. I don't discount the idea of a full on heel turn from Kenny Omega, perhaps. But I ultimately feel like we're not going to get a title change. I don't think Moxley will be making his way over. It's hard for me to see that, especially like with the knowledge that like now that he's got a pregnant wife at home. Not to say like, that sort of like she's. I mean, as far as I know, maybe not that deep into the pregnancy, but I also just feel like Moxley has so many like responsibilities just being a part of AEW that I just can't really see him taking the amount of time off required of him to be a part of that show. And I feel like there's still enough life in the run here that you can build to a rematch between the two for a pay-per-view, perhaps, at Revolution, where you do finally execute it. I do ultimately feel like you're getting enough of an audience here to tune into the match itself, but the title change, I think, should be reserved for a pay-per-view match.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a chance that we get a time limit draw as well.
Ooh, that's a very interesting possibility, and the like whenever this match starts will be an interesting one. When do you like? I've heard Dave Meltzer say that he really thinks next week the match should start, like somewhere in the 9 o'clock range, just so that you don't really kind of like telegraph the amount of time left in the match. How do you feel about that?
I mean, from kind of the galaxy brain 4-dimensional chess view, I like that. I mean, I am one of those people who, when I'm watching a baseball game on PVR or something and I see how much time is left, you can't help but sort of crunch the math and figure out where the story is going to go. So for the purposes of keeping it completely obscure or occluded, I like that as an idea. But I mean, again, we're talking about your world title match, and a match that has been built up for a lengthy period of time. Maybe if you wanted to start with it in the very, very opening, in the very opening, like, just, welcome to Dynamite, boom, coming, introducing Kenny Omega, introducing Jon Moxley, and then you're totally open, right? It could be 10 minutes, could be an hour. You have no clue then.
That would be insane. Like, if they wrestle for the whole 2 hours, which obviously I don't think will ever happen, but like, imagine if they went so long that they had to like scrap some of these other matches that they announced. Like, that would be pretty unique, like, for a TV wrestling show, and not something I would even complain about. Like, I could, as much as I want to see Jericho versus Kaz, for instance, like, if they had to cancel something for this match going on overtime, essentially, like, that would be a really interesting concept. Of course, the question is, what do you follow up this match with if you do put it on earlier? There's enough here, like, especially like, what is it, Cody and Darby versus Starks and Allen. Like, that's a viable, like, worthy, follow up that's not going to completely kill its audience.
Sure.
Make the audience switch channels. So I'm not totally against the idea, but there's just something about, I think, title matches that I really like having at the very end of a show. So my hope is that, like, they start it maybe at about, I don't know, the 9:20 range, like, have the entrances come out in bell time 9:30, just so that you at least give the impression that we're going to get a solid 30 minutes from these two.
Right.
Up next, we got a Justin from New York who says, such a great show. Fantastic from start to finish. Just a damn near perfect 2-hour TV show. Great stuff from Page and Silver, Shida and Jay. Everybody in the main, I'm ready for Murder Hawk versus Butcher Hoss fight ASAP. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my goodness. Okay, I feel like this is really me earning my post stripes here. As we go.
So grateful for that you do this one.
As we go to Brandon from NJ. Gentlemen, good evening. What's up, chaps? How are thee? First time, long time. I've never awake to be able to write these due to work. But since it's American giving of the thanks and a salute to the butcher who enslaved Native Americans, I have the ability to construct an email that you can enjoy, and I'm glad you do. AEW was a fine show tonight. Meanderings. Oh, goodness. Meanderings. Kenny Omega's suit and glasses look. Is it me, or does he look like not the cleaner, but Sato from Karate Kid 2? Oh, I don't remember that one off the top of my head, but that is absolutely a reference I could see Kenny getting a kick out of. I just always assume it's like some some gaming or anime, some weeaboo stuff that Kenny is deep into whenever he's rocking a look that I don't know.
I think that's just the way he looks in that type of thing.
Yeah, he's worn a similar look. Now that I think about it, he has worn a similar look to NJPW press conferences in the past. So
right.
that could just be like formal, kind of heelish, cleaner, Omega. Bruce Lord has done a great job filling in, but I'm curious if you think Premier Jason Kenney's lockdown measures are too harsh or for the greater good of Alberta. Oh boy. I mean, technically I'm from BC, not Alberta, although I do have a lot of friends in Alberta. You do not want me cutting a promo on Alberta, and specifically the premier of Alberta with his I don't know. That's a very for better or for worse, for American listeners, the whole stereotype of Alberta being the Texas of Canada often holds true, and certainly with the way that the pandemic has been handled, I think that also applies here as well. But I'll leave it at that before I get Wayne and John in any more trouble. Where else?
Oh, we don't mind. If you wanted.
No. I don't know. I have a friend who's a business owner, a nightclub owner actually in Calgary, who's had to voluntarily shut his place down just because the measures aren't strict enough and they aren't doing anything, and he doesn't feel as though he can in good conscience stay open when he feels as though he's continuing to endanger his clientele.
The big controversy of the day in Toronto has been this barbecue restaurant that has opened up in defiance, and it's just like, God, like it's just like the type of like debate that I feel like we've had a whole lot of over the past month, like leading up to this election cycle in the U.S. But just to have something like this happen, like so big in my own backyard, has been just a real shit show on really several fronts. But anyway.
Yeah. We had a march of a similar thing here in Vancouver a little while ago, and yeah, when you've got people flying QAnon flags in front of a friggin' barbecue restaurant, like Jesus Christ. Anyway, today is the anniversary of my sister and sister-in-laws starting a line brawl at an establishment because another woman was trying to creep on her husband. What are your memories of the night before American Thanksgiving? In the States, it's a big party night. I don't know. It's American Thanksgiving, so it's just another weekday for me.
I'm afraid I don't really have any feelings of American. You know what? This is my memory of.
It is now.
Yeah, Brandon. Like, so Bruce, you said last week you teach like college level.
Yeah. College age students. Yep.
So are you like some form of like can I call you a professor or anything like that?
Technically not. I don't have my PhD, and I have not been given a formal professorship. So no. But that doesn't stop my students from doing it because they don't know better.
Well, let me just my point is that Brandon from New Jersey has somehow made this post-secondary level educator read his feedback, which is I think the best Thanksgiving I could give.
And it finishes off with the holidays are coming away. Jingle, jangle, jingle, jangle. Ahem, I'm out of here. Peace. Goodness. There we go.
Oh, man. Pleasure as always, Brandon. And that about does it for how can you follow that? So that does it for this edition of Rewind-a-Dynamite. Bruce Lord, a pleasure again. Great job. You are the top flight, I would say.
Oh, cheers. Thank you very much. And that means a lot coming from, the world's foremost expert on Steve Blackman trivia, as we all found out this past weekend.
Kidding me? That was my highlight of the year.
Definitely. Who even remembers who wins, right? Nobody remembers who won the 2015 World Series. We remember the bat flip, and that was your bat flip, I think.
That's it. My black, but nah, didn't work. Okay, everybody. Hey, where can people follow you again, Bruce? I know you're not huge on social media, but if people wanted to check out your podcast or hear a bit more from you, where?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Contrasoma, Contrasoma, as Way is alluding to. I'm a pretty light follow, but I'm also there on Grapple as well on that same username. I don't want to go through the whole rigmarole again of the music website and podcast that I run. That's idiudai.com and the We Have a Technical podcast. If you're interested in industrial music, goth music, what my partner Alex and I like to call dark alternative music, if you're interested in figuring out exactly what we mean by dark alternative music, you could also check out idieyoudiebandcamp.com. We've got some pay-by-donation compilations of original tracks by dozens of upcoming and established acts in those scenes. And all donations from those compilations are going to the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Also, I don't know, if you want more wrestling and you haven't gotten your fill yet tonight, go watch the Go Shiozaki and Katsuhiko Nakajima match on Noah's The Chronicle Volume 4. Friggin' fantastic match. I think it's still up available on Abema TV for a couple of days. Definite match of the year contender.
That is awesome. Thank you for that extra suggestion here. And we don't like our I guess plans are going to vary week by week from this point forward about like when exactly John might make his return. So I stay tuned, I suppose, for next week's schedule. But regardless, it's been so refreshing to be able to hear your takes and your voice on our shows, Bruce. I would definitely be sure that we would be able to hear from you if you want to come back to the show sometime soon.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Definitely. This has been a real treat for me. Like I think I've mentioned before, I've been tracking you and John's work for many, many years now. And, referencing my own podcast there, you guys have been a major influence on how myself and my partner Alex run that podcast and everything. So getting to sit in on something like this and exchange thoughts about, a product that I do enjoy like AEW, it's just been a fantastic opportunity. So I really thank you for it.
The pleasure is ours. And as we mentioned, Bushby, thank you very much, Andrew Thompson, for joining us. He will be joined by Martin Bushby, as well as Righteous Reg, and also Benno talking about ROH's Manhattan Mayhem. Subscribe to the British Wrestling Experience feed for that one, or just listen at postwrestling.com. Our friends at Up Next right now have the review of WWE NXT. We're a few days away, actually, just a little over a week from War Games. So see all the development there. And Friday, I'm going to be back with John Cena for Rewind a SmackDown, live for all patrons at 10:15 Eastern. So join me for that and enjoy the rest of your weekend. So talk to you soon. Bye.